Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co.
I'm Professor Meg.
And today we are reviewing 20 Strong's Tanglewood Red. I believe this is Tanglewood Red. Yeah, there's going to be white and gold as well. I don't know enough about those two. They are in the Tanglewoods framework, which is within the 20 Strong framework, which is 20 Strong is from Chip Theory Games. Tanglewoods is a world, the world is by and illustrated by Manny Trembley. The individual games might be designed by a variety of people and all those things, but this is Tanglewoods Red. That's kind of the intro. Now we can talk about the game. So, Tanglewoods, 20 Strong. This is based on the 20 Strong infrastructure. There's also a gameplay on the channel. I should tell you about that. There's a gameplay. Meg did a gameplay. You can go and check that out and see how she did. But this over here is built on the 20 Strong infrastructure, which means you're going to be playing as a solo game, which you're going to be rolling dice. You effectively have 20 strong warriors. You're rolling dice over here and using those dice to try to get through a wave of various enemies in order to eventually go ahead and take down the boss. That's the core idea of the game. I should note this particular version is a prototype, rules and components subject to change, but the 20 Strong game series itself, that already has a 20 Strong Solar Sentinels, 20 Strong Too Many Bones, and 20 Strong Hoplomachus. Those are the three games they currently have, and they are adding 3 new games in the Tanglewoods series or theme. To that end, as far as Tanglewoods Red, the general idea, like I said already, is you're going through a solo game to try to take down a boss. The actual execution of how this one works is you're going to start with a pool of dice. You'll start with a character, and you're going to start with a starting card over here. You're going to take your die, which is slowly going to be moving along a pathway. If you've played, say, The Spire, this type of art will be very familiar as you try to choose what types of encounters you're going to have along the way. Every single node tells you what type of thing is in that node, whether it's an enemy, whether it's a little mini-boss, whether it's a resting area, but they also have little symbols around the node that tell you what type of modifier is present, whether it's additional enemies, whether you have to pay a toll to go there, things like that. The two cards over here, the two sides of the cards, are going to be the day phase and the night phase, and that's going to be because every round you can go ahead and start by choosing whether to explore. You can use blue and yellow dice to explore, you roll the dice, and depending on what you get, that means we're going to be adding a night side card to the deck over here. Night side cards are not great, but depending if you had rolled a success, you'll be able to roll a day side card, and if you roll a crit, you get a day side card +1. Then after you do that, every time you explore, you can go ahead and encounter the merchant. The merchant's going to be where you can go ahead and buy banished dice, which dice will be banished a lot in this game, but also, for every die you use to explore, you can grab items and potentially buy those items as well, using your gold counter in the game. Once you've done all that, you'll start moving along the nodes, and depending which node to go to, you'll be encountering things like fables over here. Fables are going to come from the bottom of the enemy deck over there, which will give you these little encounters of just different kind of like, either choose your own adventure or something happening, good and bad things happening to you from the fables. Alternatively, you'll be encountering enemies where you'll be able to see 3 enemies at a given time. This stack of 3 enemies is the enemies upcoming. That's going to be the big bad wolf you'll eventually fight. And these enemies, you're going to pull them onto the board, depending if you're fighting 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 5 enemies, and then dealing with their attack, with their health, their attack, and their bribery value, which is where you pay the money for them to go away. On the other hand, if you kill them, you'll usually get money, and when the combat is finished, you'll refresh your dice. You'll refresh some of your exhausted dice back, because the entire principle of this game is trying to use all the tools at your disposal to survive long enough to take down the big bad wolf. Speaking of the big bad wolf in Tanglewoods Red, one thing that's going to happen is you have these little mini-boss encounters along the way. The mini-bosses are enemies, kind of little mini-wolves that you have to fight, and as long as you fight them, they go away. They might hurt you, you might win, you might lose, they go away, but if you don't encounter them, then the big bad wolf comes into play with them as modifiers to him instead, making him the bigger, badder wolf as opposed to just the big bad wolf. Either way, he's a threat. Just a question of how much of a threat he's going to be. That's the general idea of the game. There's going to be some small other elements that we didn't really get into. Again, you can check out the gameplay if you want to see it all play out. But past that, do you want to go ahead and dive into the review of this one?
Absolutely. So this is a very unique game where it's in a shared world, but the games are so different. It's not like something like Ticket to Ride where they all feel very similar. It is in a similar world where you don't feel completely foreign, that the dice behave similarly and you can kind of intuitively guess things, but it really is so different deck to deck that I felt that this was an entirely new game in its own. So that being said, I think there's a lot of exploration that it gives you. There were a lot of things that I did really enjoy about the game, especially being able to explore and kind of choose your own path based on what you have available to you. For example, some of these will require you to pay gold or banished dice to be able to pass through them, so you can plan to have gold ahead of time for when you need to be going through those areas. Another thing that I thought was kind of fun, because I do tend to roll really well, is there are traps. So on a trap you roll a blue die, and on a success you actually get to recover 2 dice. So I found that going through traps was actually helpful for me in helping me to recall extra dice while I was going through the different paths. So I think that there are a lot of ways where these woods can feel a bit treacherous, such as like encountering the different Fable cards, but some of them will hurt you and some of them will help you. And some of them, it can really depend on what's happening to you, kind of giving a luck element. But I think with like the whimsy of fairy tales, coming across something and having it be good or bad for you is kind of par for the course.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you on the 20-strong universe and how different it can feel. For context, I've played through all the games by now, or at least not true. I've played through the 3 original, plus red, not white or gold.
Right.
But from the original ones, I think Solar Sentinels versus Hopomakis, I think they feel so drastically different. Whereas I do think Too Many Bones feels a bit similar to Solar Sentinels, but the difference is enough that it's different, but it feels a bit more adjacent. And this, again, feels completely different as you go through this. It clearly has the infrastructure, but the actual execution of how you're trying to navigate within that infrastructure, totally different. So for me, from the 4 decks I've played so far, 3 of them feel drastically different, and one feels like more of a variant than the others. And that makes me very excited for white and gold, by the way, to see what they do. But as far as this one over here, there's a lot of things I really enjoyed.
It's not blue-black?
I think it's white gold. You're joking? Oh.
I'm dating
That was
ourselves.
funny. That was funny. That was funny.
you.
It took me a second. I was like, what are you talking about?
I'm gonna message them. They should do like a thing where
Little
it's
thing.
like
Oh, that would be great if they
Yeah.
introduced the blue-black decks and confuse people. Chip Theory, you should do
is
this.
it white gold or blue black?
Anyways, as far as the differences over here, I will... So, I've already done a full review of 20 Strong, and you can check that out if you want, but to cover kind of the things that are different here, or the things that really stood out for me that I enjoyed, first of all, I'll say that I love the items deck. The Merchant and the items deck really feels like all the 20 Strong games do have ways of having items, but very often it's going to be like things that your enemies had are going to come into your deck, and they do have a little bit of that, like the bosses as well. They have times where you can use things from the enemies, but more often than not, the enemies are giving you gold, and you're using the gold to buy items. A slightly different version of the same system, but I like gathering those items, and the process of exploring gives you more agency for gathering items, so the Merchant in general felt like a fun little way to find items and to upgrade those items too, which is another nice little twist that isn't in most of the ways you typically have an item in the game. So the ability to have an upgraded item that really helps you in your journey, I like that, kind of built into the DNA, but also different. For me, this pathway over here, this whole process of exploring the pathway, I am a huge fan of Slay the Spire, so this felt very familiar and yet taken and adapted to its own system and really worked within the system, both in terms of the threat of day versus night, as well as the way it incorporates the Merchant and being able to buy additional items. Overall, really enjoyed that. The character variety, solid, but that's traditional to the 20 Strong universe. I've always enjoyed the variety of characters and how a single character can make a drastically different feeling to the game. I like the principle of the way the enemies are over here. Again, different systems in the 20 Strong universe have done things differently, but this one kind of feels like a pathway. It's not like you have a choice of 3 enemies. You have the enemies coming at you one at a time. You just can kind of get a sense of the things approaching you as you go through the distance. I kind of like the Fable system, and I'll come back to this later, but the Fable system in general feels like every card is not just a potential enemy. Every card represents another possible Fable, which means there's so many choices, so many things, events that can happen along the way, because every single one of the cards you're encountering could be one of those things that's going to show up as a bit of a story moment, which means this feels like there's so much room for types of things to happen and come your way in different ways. So overall, and then the modifier system for the Big Bad Wolf as well. In general, like there's always going to have different variations to the way Chip Theory games, not just in the 20 Strong system, but even things like Too Many Bones, there are varieties of making the big bads harder depending on where you encounter them. But I really like the way they did it over here with the Big Bad Wolf, where you're going to be facing off against the Big Bad Wolf, but he will be stronger with different modifiers depending on the enemies you've taken on along the way. And all those things take the typical 20 Strong system, but do it in a way that really makes this one feel almost more, I want to say from all the 20 Strongs, this one felt the most like an actual journey that you're going on, to me at least.
Okay.
I think Solar Sentinels felt like a progression, but not necessarily a journey or story. Hopomakis feels a bit like you're wandering around a battlefield in a way that is fun. This one really felt like there's a start and an end to your destination.
Yeah, I would say the Too Many Bones one kind of gives me that feel because you know you're on a clock. You know you're counting down days, but that's more like the knowledge of it and knowledge from the other game as opposed to like what this shows you.
Yeah, but those are the main things that kind of stood out to me about this one. Anything else on your end before we move to pet peeves or things we don't like?
I do want to say for ease of play, I think this was one of the easiest to pick up. And that doesn't mean that it's not as complex or not as much going on, but I think that they've really developed a lot within this game and how Chip Theory puts out their different games and their aids. And this particular card, like it just walks you through everything. And between the iconography of the shapes of the nodes and then what's in the node, it's so intuitive and fast and easy that I really did just appreciate that almost everything you need to know for the game is right there.
Yeah, you kind of have to know how the explore phase works, and it is covered on the card, don't get me wrong, but you have to know the basics of the explore phase and the basics of the merchant, how that follows, and then how to modify the big bad wolf. But outside of that, it really does cover everything you need to know, and especially if you're familiar with 20 Strong, you'll have a lot of the infrastructure of how combat works, and so you'll have basically the tools you need with a small few adjustments to learn along the way. It's very, very easy to pick this one up. As far as things you don't like, do you have anything you don't like?
So I did feel that the merchant was drastically underused in every game I've played.
Interesting.
I think that there's a lot of really great items that I've wanted, and I never felt that I was at the point where I could pay money for them. I think that often because you have to pay money to go through certain nodes, because this toll one, anytime you hit it, you have to pay money, and you also know what enemies are coming, so you know that you're going to be wanting to bribe certain ones, especially if you're going for a node that has a mob on it, and you're going to be hitting even more. So I have yet not felt comfortable in this game paying money for items, which I like them. I want to use them. They sound so cool, and I like that they're available, but I think the economy just isn't quite there in the games that I've played. But that being said, that could just be my playstyle too.
And I've done so. I have bought items, but I also haven't beaten the big bad wolf yet, so I can't say whether it's efficient to buy items. I can just say that I've been tempted by the shiny and bought the shiny. But actually that leads to a few of the things that we can talk about here, which is, first of all, I do feel this game is challenging. Like, I don't know, have you won the Big Bad Wolf yet?
No.
I have not won against the Big Bad Wolf yet.
No.
I should check the other playthroughs out there and see whether this is an us issue or whatnot. Now, I will say also, the game does have a difficulty scaling system where you can make the game harder or easier in order to modify it to your situation. I don't feel I'm at the point where I want to modify it yet.
Yeah.
I just want to play it more and get a better feel for like when to bribe, when to go ahead and progress and all that. But so far, the game does feel challenging in a way that it doesn't bother me. I should put them more on the things I can see others not liking, because I don't feel there's two ways of losing games. There's losing games and there's feeling defeated. I haven't gotten to the point where I feel defeated in this game. I've simply lost or done well and gotten certain points and like, oh no, they killed me. Okay, cool, it's fine. And that's a big thing in the 20 Strong universe in general to be mindful of, is very often you're only walking around with a few health. And so if you only have 2 health and somebody hits you for 2, it's gone. So you're not walking around with a giant pool, and you have to play around that. You have to know that and prep for it. And that's one of the things, the campfires in this game let you get 2 health back, but alternatively you recover your other stats. And I tend to be a sucker for recovering my other stats so I can start spending more dice and having more success as I go through it. But again, haven't actually won, so take that with a grain of salt. So difficulty is definitely going to be a factor to be mindful of. I'm not yet at the point where I don't like that. I'm at the point where I'm wary of it. I could use modifiers, but that feels like giving up a little too soon.
Yeah.
I will say, as far as the fables, this can be a big pet peeve of mine with the fable so far. The principle of drawing and resolving a fable when you get to a spot. I don't know what your experience has been like, because I know we had one game we played together. It's a solo game, but we are learning the game. But then past, I don't know what your experiences have been. I've had them be more negative than positive.
See, I've enjoyed them.
Interesting.
I've had negative ones or neutral ones, but I think more often than not, I would rather do that than try to encounter a minion.
So that's where I think we might differ then, because for me, I love the idea of wanting to explore the fables, but I wish they were more neutral to positive, as opposed to right now they feel neutral to negative from the ones I've seen. I haven't looked at them.
There's one that you can keep next to the path.
Yeah.
And change any symbol you want to a campfire when you get there.
That's really cool.
I know.
Okay, fine. Now I'll be exploring the fables more.
Good.
Because I haven't looked through them.
Yeah.
I've only gone through the ones I've experienced, and they've drifted more towards again.
Like, here's the top one, Lily of the Valley. You may move your hard die to any node on the current map card, then roll all banished dice. If at least one crit is rolled, +1 to any stat.
So like, if I got more of those, I'd explore them more.
Yeah.
Which again, I should go through those, I guess, and see the holistic. For me, when I've gone through them, they've been more neutral to negative. I think I've gotten one positive one, and that made me less excited, because the sense of mystery is there, but the actual thing I get is sometimes a slap in the face, and that makes me shy away from it the next time. Past that, I'll also say that I didn't love that you're always fighting the big bad wolf. I do like the fact that it's modified differently depending on how the game goes, but for a game that's so variable in so many different ways, I understand the thematic desire to have the big bad wolf as the ultimate, penultimate enemy, or not ultimate enemy. So thematically, I appreciate it, but even if they could just give different cards or something, because one of the things the 20 Strong series is so good at is giving you that variety baked in, and this has that in every other sense, but then you get to the end and it's the same boss every single time. So I do wish that were a drop different, even though I appreciate the thematic reason for it, and I appreciate that it might be modified differently. I still wish there was potential for a different enemy, even if it's just different stats or different cards or who knows what along the way. Anything else you don't like?
I think that's it for me. I think one thing, which this could happen with any game, with anything, any kind of randomness, but there are definitely some minions that you are just so locked out of being able to do anything. That's why I felt holding on to gold was so important.
To bribe the way out of them?
Because, I mean, look at these two. Purple cannot be used, and this is you can only commit dice if they're already in your exhaust. So if you have to fight both of those together...
That's a hard time.
That's very, very difficult.
Yeah, which kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with my last complaint, which is if you have a hard time early on in this game, you may as well reset and start again, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think that the problem is not winning against an enemy denies you the reward. And so not only are you not doing well and probably taking damage, you're also not getting that early gold, which could be used to buy banished dice, to buy items. I think you need to have a good start early on, and if you aren't able to get a good start, reset and get that good start, because once you have a little bit of a pile of gold, you're able to buy a few more items, you're able to buy your banished dice, you buy yourself that breathing room necessary to power through the rest, or even to bribe a few enemies here and there. The bribing system I thought was I like the bribing system, although I don't like bribing enemies. Meaning, I don't like whenever I choose to give an enemy money to not engage with them, because I'd rather kill them and get their money as opposed to give them my money.
Right.
But there are times and situations, especially when you're fighting multiple enemies, where sometimes that tool is very, very useful. That funnel web spider, by the way, that one's the worst. Whenever you bribe them, they just keep coming back, which is it's kind of deferring the slap on the face as opposed to anything else. But overall, I like the system. Those are the few nitpicks that I do have for that one. Those are the few nitpicks I do have for the system as it currently stands. As far as final thoughts and rating, do you have a rating for the original 20 Strong?
I don't.
Do you want to think of a rating for the original 20 Strong?
Sure. I think I would rate... I don't know if I would rate all of the decks separately. And I have not played all three of those decks in a bit since I played them all together. But I think personally, I would rate the first three decks a 4.5.
Okay.
And I think Tanglewoods I would rate a 4.
Oh, it's worse for you.
For me, it's not as engaging.
Interesting.
Because I do think that this is a game that's I think this particular version is one that it's a lot easier to just feel that sense of defeat quickly. And that being said, like, I am a TCG player and I'm very used to playing a game and then immediately noticing when you might lose, stopping, resetting. And I do think that this feels a lot more like that, more like a TCG, more of like a card game than a solo puzzle. To me, it did really feel like you were fighting against something instead of taking yourself through a puzzle. And for me, especially like the lacking in the merchant and kind of having economy that I didn't know where to spend it. I think this one was just a little less for me.
Interesting. So for me, I've only given it originally I gave 20 Strong a 4.5 as a general whole, although I should be differentiating it out, and I can tell you right now, because I already know, that for me, Solar Sentinels, Hop Mockers would be a 4.5, Too Many Bones would be a 4 for me. It's actually my least favorite, which is weird, because I love Too Many Bones game. But past that, I'll say that as far as Tanglewoods goes, for me, it's going to be a 4.5 as well. It hasn't escalated for me. I think I prefer, I don't know, I've had to put them in order. I think Hop Mockers is a drop low in the Solar Sentinels, but I think Tanglewoods is probably a drop above it, but I don't know if that's the gameplay or the theme doing that extra notch. Because I really do like the theme, I like the presentation a lot. I think the thing that makes me uncertain is the single big bad wolf at the end. I really find that just less fun. If the end is the climax, the ultimate thing, and you're always fighting the same thing every single time, that takes a little bit away from it for me. So like, I probably would still keep Solar Sentinels at the top, but this would be right below it there. But yeah, a 4.5 for me. I like a lot of things. It's not a perfect game where it is right now. There's some things I still want to see differently, but there's enough things that I really enjoy here that this is up there with the rest of the good ones of the series for me. And that's basically it. As far as recommendations, do we have recommendations? I don't even know.
I do.
I didn't think of one yet.
What was it? Oh, a great recommendation that I think is a satisfying puzzle that takes you through a journey and a story is Island Something Shiny. I really enjoy that game. I know we kind of see it a little bit differently.
Yeah. Oh, we do.
But I think that for a similar solo puzzle where you're affecting the story and kind of going through something whimsical and fun, I think that is very similar.
Interesting. And for me, I'm going to go with one that I've been talking about briefly here and there. I was referring more to the video game, but Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire is going to give you a series of progression. Very, very different game. But if you like that kind of solo, going through your own journey, although I will say Slay the Spire can be played cooperatively as well. In fact, one of the reasons to play the tabletop game. But if you like that journey and that pathway and trying to work your way towards a boss and hopefully take them out, I think that will have a lot more going on in it. It's a little more expensive, a little more going on, but a very satisfying experience. And that's basically it. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co.
I'm Professor Meg.
And have a good one.
Bye.